Hi, I'm Debbie. Thank you for joining me today. So we are going to be painting this pink sunset design. I did this one on a 12 by 24 canvas, but you can do any size, doesn't really matter. I'm going to walk you through every step. We're going to use the basic 3 colors that I use in all my tutorials, magenta, blue, and yellow, and white. And I'm going to teach you how to mix every single color. So I hope you'll join me, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you'd like to get notified when I upload new videos, then make sure to hit that little bell that pops up next to the subscribe button once you do subscribe. So I hope you will join me. So today we are in a different setup. I'm out of town this weekend. I'm at my boyfriend's house in Ramona, California. And I thought this would be a nice, beautiful spot to paint by the window. He is under construction, so this is his new kitchen. It's a construction war zone right now, so it's a mess. There's stuff everywhere, and he's right in the heat in the middle of redoing his whole house. So this will be a kitchen one day. Right now it's just got lots of junk everywhere. So I came out of town planning on doing some filming this weekend, and as soon as I set up my camera, my battery died. So I'm using my cell phone today. Hopefully this will come out clear enough. And then I didn't have any of my regular attachments, so I had to rig up a system, and hopefully it's gonna work out okay. It consists of a ladder, a banana, and a box of spaghetti noodles to prop my camera up. So wish me luck. I hope this works out okay. All right, let's get into it. Let's just start off. We're gonna draw a line. We're gonna do it below the halfway mark. So let's just go there. Don't worry if it's not perfect. Okay. And we're gonna start off. We've got our paints, white, magenta, yellow, and primary blue. Take a big scoop of white, a little bit of, and a teeny bit of blue. And right now that's a little too purple. Let's take a little bit of magenta. Let's see how that looks. Way more white. A little more magenta. I want a little more magenta. Way more white. We want to keep this really light. Still a little bit too. I'm going to take a teeny bit of yellow. Okay, let's just get that in there. I'm going to do more white. Teeny bit more yellow. Get your brush a little bit wet. Just go down about halfway. Then I'm going to clean off your brush. And let's take a little bit of big scoop of white, take a little bit of yellow, teeny bit of magenta. See, I'm just barely using any because I want this to be very light. A little more yellow, a little more magenta, a lot of white. I'm just gonna blend it right into the wet edge. And dragging it right where those two meet. Take a little more yellow, a little more magenta, a little more yellow, big scoop of white, a little more magenta. We're going to use a lot of white in this painting. Kind of a peachy color. Okay. Drag it right across. Get my brush a little bit wet. You can blend some streaks up into here. Bring a little more of that magenta into that first mix. So take a teeny bit of blue, a little bit of magenta. Let's mix that. Yeah, a little more of the magenta. You don't have to do these exact colors. If you are going in a different direction and you're liking it, absolutely go for it. Make it your own. We're going to use a lot of white in this. Since the paint's wet, we could bring that in and just blend it right into the wet paint. Get your brush a teeny bit wet. And I can just fade right into it. Bring the brush a little bit wet. Mix of the two. Just lightly dragging my brush and blending. Take a scoop of white, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of yellow. I'll make this a little more pink. A little more pink. And by doing thin layers, it's just going to blend it in really nicely. You'll see a lot of depth by just doing layers and layers of color. Okay, we're going to get a little more magenta, yellow, white. More magenta. And get pretty warm. More pinky. More magenta. I mean yellow. Let's see. Yeah, I like that. A little bit of water. We're going to go right down to our water line. I'm cleaning off my brush and wiping most of the water off. So I just have kind of a clean, damp brush, and I'm just going to blend it right into that background. I'm keeping this fairly low. Add a little more white. Get my brush off again. And just with a damp brush, I'm just lightly blending it into that layer above it. Take my 5/8 angular brush. I'm gonna mix a light peachy color. A little bit of this. Very, very light shade. A little more of a yellow tone. More white. I want it almost white, just barely. Now wipe off my brush. Clean off my brush. And I want it really dry. I'm going to take a new brush that's dry and just put in a little bit, and I'm just going to add some faint. I'm using the side of my brush. I'm just kind of dragging, getting some cloud shapes in there. Get a little of that peachy color in there. Maybe a few down here. Put a little more white in there. Maybe just a few over here. Small one. Okay, I'm so mad. My camera shifted on me and I didn't realize it. I just happened to check to make sure I was still filming, and I saw that you kind of missed all these clouds. I was worried about that happening. So all I was doing, it's really simple. I was using the side of my brush, and I have barely any paint on my brush, and I'm holding my brush sideways, and I'm just kind of spreading it around, and little bits of the paint are touching the canvas, making it kind of textury, and that's how I'm creating these cloud shapes. So I did it with that, it's kind of a light peachy, a little more golden color. Did that first, and then I took a little bit of white into it, and I added little bits of white along the bottom edges of each of these cloud shapes. And you can just spread them randomly where you want, but it really does help to hold the brush sideways. I'm using the 5/8 angular brush, holding it sideways and just kind of smudging it around really lightly. And the lighter your color is, the more faint it will look, and it'll look a little more soft and blended. So that technique did that here, And then I used the mix of the kind of a dark purple. It was some magenta. I'm gonna mix some more of it. Some magenta, some blue, some white, and a touch of yellow. Same technique here. But with these clouds, I did them a little more spread out, a little more horizontal and stretched out, and just little bits, just a little bit of paint on your brush, and just little smudges here and there. And then I added a large group of them here. We're gonna add some more now here. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to make do with my situation I have here today. So hopefully that didn't mess you up too much, but I'm gonna do some more of these clouds now so you'll see what I'm doing here. So let's mix some more of a purpley shade. We're gonna take a scoop of white, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of blue. We'll start with just a tiny bit, and let's mix that up and see what we got. Okay, so it's very purpley right now. We're gonna take a little, let's take a little more magenta. I need some more of that on my palette. And a little more blue. Now by adding a little bit of yellow, it's gonna mute it down, so it's gonna make it not so vibrant. And we need to go a lot darker because right now this is way lighter than that. So let's add some more magenta. So we're trying to mix this shade again. I'm doing it over here so we can compare the color. And let's see. That's a lot more purple. Let's take a little bit of yellow to tone it down. And since I added some blue and then some yellow, it's got a green tint to it. So let's take a little magenta. A little more magenta. Whoa, that was a lot. That's all right. Mix it all up. A little more blue. So let's take more magenta and a little more yellow. That's gonna get us where we need to be. Yeah. All right, so we just needed a little more yellow to make it more of a mauve shade. I'm wiping off most of the paint. Yeah, that's what we want. Okay, let's do a layer right along the top here. Make this kind of flat. And we'll do some down here. Kind of like the clouds are sort of creeping in. We're gonna end up putting the sun about right in the middle. And I want these clouds to kind of be soft. So I'm just really smudging my way across, so sort of floats in. Let's do some more over here. Let's do a little more here. I'm going to blend just a little more, very lightly. I want to kind of, just a very thin layer. I'm going to clean off my brush. I'll wipe off the extra water and just very thin layer, just kind of faintly blending in a little bit of this. By doing a very thin layer, it'll just kind of blend, and some of this reddish orange color will show through. So just gonna add another layer of depth. Yeah, that's pretty. Again, just barely any paint on your brush, a little bit of water, just to kind of tone down this very bottom level. Yeah, that's pretty, I like that. I'm just bringing a thin layer right over these to soften them up a little. Just want to soften up these edges a little bit. Once these are dry, you can go over it with a little thin layer of the color, the same color, just to kind of bring them together. Just lightly rubbing over the top of them to make them a little soft and blended. And again, barely. I'm just gonna do a few more streaks. Barely any paint on my brush with a damp brush. I just want to do a few more layers down here, just to really give it a lot of perspective. Again, just a little bit of that, but see how it's very watered down? Barely any paint on my brush. I just want to add a little bit of cloud, but very faint, so it should be lighter than these. So by it being watered down, it's just going to be very thin and subtle. Just a few little bits here and there. Again, just using the side of my brush, flat edge. Let's take this same color of the cloud, and we're going to bring some down here. Actually, let's make it a little darker. Take a little bit of blue, mix it into that pile. A little bit of white, teeny bit of white. Let's see. Let's take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of magenta. Mix that all up and see what you get. I want to do sort of a deeper purpley muted down color, kind of a grayish purple. Yeah, that'll work. Let's go right below this line, and we're just going to paint in this bottom right corner. This is going to be the sand, like the water's edge, and the sand is. So we got that covered. Let's get a little bit darker and do some blue, some magenta, a little bit of yellow, a little more magenta. I want to keep this a little warmer. Just a little bit up here. I'm just going to streak it. Just keep it kind of streaky. Little skinny streaks. And I was using my 1-inch wash brush for that. I'm going to go back to my 5/8 angular brush. Take a little bit of white. And take a little bit of white, a little bit of magenta. And then we're going to just do some streaks. This is the sand. We're just doing some streaks kind of at an angle. So they're kind of going at this angle. We're just kind of blending those in. Just giving a little bit of texture. Just lots of streaks. We don't want them too bright. This is actually brighter. As we blend it into the wet paint background, it's fading it out a little bit. So we're just giving it some more depth and perspective. Keeping it a little brighter here, and then it'll fade out as it gets further back. Keeping them all the same angle though. Make sure they're all going this direction. Gotta get that bottom edge of the canvas there. Let's take a little white, magenta, and a teeny bit of yellow. A little more white. We're making a light peachy color. Let's go even lighter. A little bit more on the pink side. And we're just gonna blend. This is gonna be the water edge. But we're not doing a really tight detail. We're just letting it sort of blend into that dark color. Getting a little bit of water on my brush. And I'm just sort of fading it into the edge. It's not going to be a real defined line. We don't want to be real clear on this one. We're just keeping it kind of faint. Let it kind of, I'm kind of flicking my brush right into the edge. And back here it can be a little more crisp. Okay, let's add some of this pink along this line too. Have that go right up to the edge. Keep this as straight as you can. If you need to use a piece of tape, you can do that. I don't want this one to be real tight lined. And then we're going to get a little deeper in here. Let's take a little more magenta, a little bit of yellow. You want a similar shade to that. Yeah. Get your brush a little bit wet. I'm just going to lightly blend. do this whole water area. You can blend it into the other color. Let's take a little more magenta. Scoop up one of your other colors there. Let's just take some of this. If you have any more of that cloud color, mine's all dry. Take a little bit of blue, a little bit of magenta. I'm just gonna pull some of the colors that are up in the sky. We could take a little yellow, a little more magenta. Just bring some of those colors. Just sort of drag them back and forth into the water. A little more magenta. And it's going to blend into the wet paint. Magenta, yellow, more yellow, maybe some white. Whoa, too much white. More magenta and yellow. Magenta. With my brush, and just with a damp brush, I'm just going to blend it right into the water. And let's take a magenta. We want to make a dark little edge right there. Take some blue, some magenta, a little bit of white. Magenta. A little bit of yellow, a little more magenta, a little more yellow, a little more magenta. Getting that kind of mauve-y color, like that. So let's do this little edge right here. And again, if you want to use a ruler or a piece of tape, you can do that. I'm just eyeballing it and hoping it's straight. I'm just using a thin line. I'm using my 5/8 angular brush. Well, let's take a little more of that. We're just going to add some little streaks in the water, just a few. Gonna water down my brush, thin out the paint a little bit. Okay, I'm about to pull out my hair. My camera died on me now, or my phone died on me. while I was filming, so I don't think you missed too much. I was just adding some of these extra streaks in the water, and then what I did was I cleaned my brush off and dried most of it off, and just with a very, very, very dry but a little bit damp brush, I'm just softly sort of blending those streaks into the water so they're not too dark. This has been a rough day filming. Everything's going wrong, but I'm determined to get this video made, so I don't even want to know what issues I'm going to have while I'm editing this thing. Anyways, let's just think positive. Hopefully none. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of a streak. I don't think this was shown on the video. I did that before, or I did it after my phone battery died. So just add another little streak here. This is going to be a little bit of a wave, little water's edge right there. And then let's clean off your brush. Let's take a little bit of white, and we're going to make a very, very faint, kind of a light peachy pink color. Mostly white though, so let's add a little more white. We just don't want it bright, bright white. We want it toned down a little bit with a little bit of a peachy, pinky shade to it. I'm going to wipe off most of my paint, and let's just add a little bit. Oh, that's really bright. Just above this dark line here, this is just going to be a like the top of the wave, a little bit of the white edge of the wave. I'm going to tone it down in a second. Just right above this dark, just this dark edge here. Just a little bit, little thin line. And then I'm cleaning off my brush, drying it off on my towel, and then I'm just going to drag my brush over the edge just to fade it back a little bit, because we just want a little hint of a lighter color. So again, just a very dry, barely, barely damp. I'm just blending it out a little bit. And just kind of streak it. Hold your brush sideways like this, so that pointy part of the brush is facing to the left. And just drag your brush across just to give it a little bit of a streaky blend kind of a thing. And then let's take a little more of that, barely any of that on your brush, that light peachy, pinky color. And we're going to add a little bit of the water's edge here, just some of this. And I'm using the flat part of my brush, and I'm just dragging it right along where the sand and the white parts of the foam of the water would crash onto the waves. And I'm just kind of blending that into the sand here. So it's kind of faded, just like we were doing it with the clouds, so it's just very faint and soft. Just doing that right along the edge, so it's kind of blending into the sand. It's sort of a hazy look. Right along that whole edge there. I'm putting a little more white, and I'm just adding a little more white right in little bits, little parts along that edge. So you see some little brighter parts, some faded. I'm doing a little bit of a back and forth zigzaggy pattern. So it looks like the waves are kind of crashing on and going back onto the, that's really bright. I'm gonna tone that down a little bit, clean off my brush, dry it off on my towel, and then with the barely, barely damp brush, I'm just going right over the top just to soften it up a little bit so it's not so bright. A little more of that white. And with my brush being a little bit damp, by adding a teeny bit of that white, it's not going to go on bright, bright white. It's going to fade it back, and when it dries, it'll fade back a little more even. Even more. And when you get back here, make that line skinnier so it looks like it's further back in the distance, and it'll give it some more perspective. Okay, and then I might just bring a little bit of this white just on this side here, because this is closer, so you might see a little bit more of this showing up. I'm just kind of blending it into the water. All right, that's kind of soft looking. Let's add our sun in here. So let's take your number 8 filbert brush. Oh man, did I stop filming? Hopefully not. Okay, I don't trust my phone today. Let's take a little bit of white and a little bit of yellow. Mix those up. You want more white than yellow. So you want like a light, like a buttery yellow color. And then let's put our sun above the water. Let's just do it right about here. Just start with a little tiny circle. We're gonna let that dry a little bit. And then let's take a little bit of this yellow and just add a few streaks in the water. Just little tiny lines. And you don't want it to all be the perfectly same length. So one can come a little longer that way, one can come out a little bit that way. It's not too perfectly. Just little horizontal streaks. And let's bring it all the way down here. Brush. I'm just going to blend this out a little bit. There's a little too much right there. And I'm just using my damp brush and just kind of fading that out a little bit. Just the area below this big wave edge here. Okay. And then let's bring a little bit of this yellow, barely any on your brush. Let's take a little bit of that white. Actually, yeah, let's just take that sun mixture we made. So your brush should be damp with barely any paint on your brush. I'm wiping most of it off. And I just want to put a little bit of a warm glow in the sky. So I'm just doing some horizontal streaks just around where the sun is. And by doing it very thin and watered down, it's just adding a layer. It's just, you're still gonna see some of this peachy coral color, but by doing a thin coat of this yellow on top, it's just gonna warm it up. So you're not completely covering that color. You're just adding to it. This color up in the sky. And I barely have any paint on my brush, just barely anything. I'm just gonna streak a little bit, just right in this area here, just to add some warm golden tones to the sky. Very faint and subtle. Let's just add just a little bit in here too. I just have a little bit left on my brush. Just streaking in a little bit of this into some other areas just to warm it up a little. Now, these clouds I can see a little bit of the canvas showing through, so I'm going to take a little bit more of that color that we made for the clouds, that mauve sort of color, and I'm just going to blend another layer right on top of some of them that look a little bit thin. The paint was just a little bit thin, so just want to make sure I can't see any of that canvas peeking through. So I'm just putting barely any paint on my brush. You can thin it out a little bit with a tiny, tiny bit of water if you need to. It's not going on smooth enough, and I'm just blending in a few little areas. I have a little bit more there. And you might not need to do this if yours looks, if you're happy with the way it looks, then don't touch it, just leave it just like it is. I just needed to have a little bit thicker in a few out. I wanted it a little bit thicker in a few areas. Okay. Now we're going to add a little more dimension to these dark clouds. So let's take a little bit, let's go a little bit over the sun too, just in a couple little spots, just to make it look like there's the sun's kicked back a little bit further. I'm just having a teeny bit of it peek over the front of the sun there. Yeah. And then we're going to do a little bit lighter shade. So we're going to take that same mauve color, add a little bit of white, and let's do a little bit of yellow. A little bit more. And then a little bit of magenta. So we're going to do kind of a peachy shade, but not too much brighter. We want it to just be a few shades. My paint's getting dry. I'm getting little pieces on it. I have to keep stopping and recharging my phone because I keep running out of battery, and there's no electricity in this room, so I've got extension cords dragging all across the house, and I couldn't find enough to charge my phone while I'm filming, so whew, it's been a tricky day of filming today. Okay, let's take a little more magenta, a little more yellow. So we're doing kind of a warm, peachy shade, let's see. And we're mixing it into a little bit of that mauve color. And then holding my brush flat again, I'm just gonna add, let's see if I like that, just a little bit. I think this will be good. Just a little bit to some of the bottoms. So if like this is a big section of cloud, we're gonna add a little bit just along the bottom edge so it looks like that warm sky is hitting the bottom of the clouds, and just really subtle. We're just blending into some areas. We don't wanna do too much. We just wanna give a little hint that there's some light hitting. Now my phone keeps running out of storage, so I have to keep stopping and deleting videos and photos and things. This day, it's an interesting one. Okay, so I'm making a peachy, a little more on the pink side, coral color. And the mauve color, if there's any bit of that that's still wet, I'm gonna blend a little bit of that into it. And I'm wiping off most of my paint. So there's just a little bit of paint on my brush. Wipe off most. And then I'm just adding little bits. That's too much. Cleaning off my brush. Need to mix a little more of that mauve color into it so it's not quite so contrasting. I just want to blend a little bit. I just want it a slightly lighter shade than the mauve color of the clouds, that purpley mauve color. Because I want it to be really subtle, just that extra color, that brightness, like a little bit of this peachy coral color being brought up into the underside of the cloud. So I just want a little bit of that. I don't want to be really dramatic. Just a little hint, just to get a little bit of extra color into the bottom of those clouds. I'm not doing much of this. Just felt like it needed just a touch here and there. And again, if you like yours just the way that it is, just leave it. You don't need to do this. Yours should look however you want yours to look. You don't have to do it exactly like what I'm doing. Okay, and I'm going to take my wet, just barely damp brush, and I'm just going to lightly blend that a little bit so it's not so dramatic. Here and there. Okay, then the very last thing, this sand area down here, all these little highlights here, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's a lot of canvas showing through there. So I want to do this a little bit thicker layers of paint so there's not so much see-through canvas showing through. So which means I need to mix that color again. So I need to mix this dark purple color again. Take some magenta, some blue, and some white. We'll start with that shade, which is going to be kind of a purple. Looks like I might need more magenta. I'm out of that. Yeah, more magenta. And to get it kind of this grayish purple tone, we're going to neutralize it with a little bit of yellow. See how that just tones it back so it's not as vibrant anymore. And I've said this before in other videos, whenever you mix all three of the primaries, that's going to gray it down and neutralize it. So if you're making a green and you're starting with a really bright green and you want to mute it down, you're going to put a tiny bit of magenta. If you're mixing magenta and yellow, making a bright orange, and you want to give it more of a deeper tone to it, more of a brownish, you'll take a little bit of blue. Same thing right now, we've got the purple from the magenta and the blue, but we want to gray it down a little bit and just mute it. We're taking a little bit of yellow. Hopefully that makes sense. And this right now is way darker than that, so let's take a little bit of white. See how that just kind of grays it up right there? And this is a lot more pinky, so we're going to take more magenta. So we're trying to match this. So we're getting there. Let's see. Still a little bit more blue. Let's take a little more magenta. Let's take a little more white too. Okay, so now I'm going to clean my brush off. So I have just a little bit of water on my brush, and I'm just gonna do a light transparent shade. Just doing some layers of a thinned out, watered down version of this color. And it's okay if your color doesn't match exactly for this, because since we're doing layers, that's just gonna give it more depth if you have a different shade mixed into it. We can add these light highlights back in. So I'm just going over most of it in random areas, just keeping that same angle that we had it going, the direction that the sand highlights were going, sort of that diagonal angle. Clean off my brush. I'm using my 1 inch wash brush, a bigger one, just to have more coverage. Okay, just kind of fading all that in, giving some more layers, a very thinned out layer of that. Now I'm going to switch to my 5/8 angular brush, that one. Are we still filming? Yes, okay. And I'm going to take a little white, mix a little bit of white into that same color, and wipe off most of your paint. And then let's add some more of those highlights. Just little swipes going in this angled direction. And some of them are overlapping each other. They're not like perfect stripes. These are just the little ridges in the sand, and the way the light's hitting the sand is creating these little shapes. Hold my brush flat against the canvas again, like we were using on the clouds, just to give it a little more texture. Just a little bit of paint on your brush. And again, do less of this, more detail here because it's up close, it's in the foreground, less of it back that way so it looks like it kind of goes back into the distance. I'm going to take some more of the dark color, add a little more of that dark color back there, just so it doesn't look so close up. Kind of blend that in, bring it back a little. I want to get a little bit lighter overall, so I'm going to take some more white. I'm going to take a little bit of magenta too, just to pink it up a little. Bring in some of these warm pinky tones. Wipe off most of my paint. And let's do some of that. More pink. I'm just lightly skimming across the top of the canvas with these highlights here. A little more white. Lighten it up a little more. As much of this as you want. Just stop when you like how it looks. And if you get too much of this light, you can just put some dark over the top of it. Just get it to where you're happy with it. I'm just taking a little bit of this and bringing just a little tiny bit up into the bottom edges of these clouds. And again, you don't have to do this, but kind of like having a little more color in there. Another shade. And I'm just doing it on the very bottom edges. Very subtle. I'm just going to add a little bit of this into the back waterline. Just little hints here and there, just in that far distance. It's just going to create another highlight reflection from the sky. Reflections in the water. Wasn't planning on doing that, but now I like it. This looks like little white caps in the water. I'm adding a little tiny more white. It's like a periwinkle, like a light periwinkle color. We have a house full of dogs here today. My dog Poet and my boyfriend's dogs, Lily and Dakota, wiener dog, and a yellow lab. Okay, I think, hey, get off there. Lie on my painting. Just adding a few streaks here and there of this color. This light periwinkle. Now it's just a matter of preference if you want to add any other details. Just adding a few more highlights, and then we will be done. I want to add just a little more white. This is the tough part of a painting where you could just keep adding and adding and adding, but sometimes you gotta know when to stop. I'm gonna add a little bit of that peachy, light peachy. It's almost completely white. Right along the water's edge. I'm using the flat part of my brush. I just want a little more of that lighter, whiter edge of the water. And by using the flat part of my brush, again, it's just making it a little more textury and giving it that appearance of the sea foam from the edge of the water. It's almost like using a palette knife. When you use a palette knife, it picks up some of the texture of the canvas. It's the same kind of technique, but we're just using the brush. You could put a little bit into the water area. Mostly right along the edge though, that's what we're doing. Okay, and almost there. I think I'm almost done. And a few streaks into the water with the edge of the brush. The skinny part of the brush, I'm just adding a few little streaks. Some more reflection. Okay, now I want to add a little more. See, it can take forever. Going back and forth, back and forth. I see, I want to have a little more of this warm sky color. So I'm taking a little bit of yellow, teeny bit of white, and I'm going to add just a little bit into the section down by where the sun is. A little more into the water. I'm using the skinny part of my brush, a little pointy tip. Just adding a few streaks here and there. And I'll take a little more of this, bring it up into the area around the sun. Just to warm up this whole section a little more. I decided I want a up here too. I barely have any paint on my brush. I'm just using a teeny bit. Okay. Now I think I'm done. It's gonna go on for an hour. I'm gonna stop though. I think. I always say that. Actually, I think I mean it. Think. And now I'm just taking a damp brush and sort of fading it out. Blending it out a little bit. Okay, I think I'm done. Working on editing my video, and I've got a bunch of friends with me. This is Dakota. Lily, what are you doing? Hi! You're so cute. And there's Poet. My Poet. And my makeshift desk here. A ladder. Fall asleep down there? What are you doing? You can lay down if you want. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had fun with that. And please send me pictures of your paintings if you did complete this tutorial. I would love to see them. You can tag me on Facebook or Instagram or message me at Avoux Studio. Thanks. Bye. Say goodbye. What? What? Why do you always stare at me like I did something wrong? I did not.